Greek Mythology for Sleep. Good evening. Welcome. Tonight we are entering the world of Greek mythology, ancient gods, titans, heroes, and monsters. Stories that somehow never seem to grow old, even though people have been telling them for thousands of years. So make yourself comfortable, take a slow breath, leave the noise of the day somewhere far away, and let us travel back to a time before history. Let us begin. In the beginning there was no Olympus, no earth, no sea, no sky. There was only chaos. And chaos was not the kind of chaos modern tongues describe: disorder, confusion, frenzy. It was older than language itself. Chaos was a yawning void, a gaping nothingness without form or direction. It was not evil, nor good, nor even neutral. It simply was. From that ancient nothing came the first stirrings of existence. Gaia, the earth vast and unshaking; Tartarus, the abyss beneath the earth, dark and dreadful; and Eros, the force of love and desire, the binding agent of all future creation. These were not gods as we think of them, not yet, but elemental truths given form. Then came Nyx, the night, clothed in a shadow so thick even chaos recoiled. She was followed by Erebus, the darkness of the underworld, who would dwell beside her in that early silence. From the union of night and darkness came Ether, the pure upper air breathed by the gods, and Hemera, the day, who from the beginning was fated to chase her mother endlessly across the sky. Thus the cycle of night and day was born not through science, but through myth, through a family of strange, invisible titans who lit and dimmed the sky with each passing hour. Gaia, the earth herself, did not lie idle. She was patient and fertile, and from her own body she brought forth Uranus, the sky vast and star-strewn. He was both her son and her consort, and when he arched over her, stretching across the heavens, the world found its first shape: a domed sky above a broad and endless plain. Gaia also birthed the mountains, tall and wild, and Pontus, the sea, who surged with a will of his own before ships or sea monsters ever touched his waters. Together, earth and sky became the first great pair, and their union brought forth the Titans, the first generation of powerful beings who would rule the cosmos long before Zeus and his kin rose to power. There were 12 Titans in all, 6 sons and 6 daughters, each vast and elemental in their own right. Oceanus, the encircling river; Hyperion, the lord of light; Coeus, the inquirer; Creus, the constellation-bearer; Iapetus, the ancestor of men; and Cronus, youngest and most cunning. Among the daughters, Theia, shining mother of the sun and moon; Rhea, future mother of gods; Themis, embodiment of divine law; Mnemosyne, the memory of all things; Phoebe, the radiant one; and Tethys, the nourishing sea. But Gaia's womb was not finished with them. She bore monstrous children as well, beings of strength and dread. First came the Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Arges, each with a single eye burning like a forge in the center of their brow. They were the smiths of lightning, strong and simple, and they feared no god nor giant. Then came the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, each of them enormous and terrible to behold, with 50 heads and 100 arms each, capable of stirring the very foundations of the world when enraged. Uranus, though lord of the sky, trembled at the sight of these monstrous offspring. Ashamed and frightened by their grotesque strength, he forced them back into Gaia's womb, the depths of earth itself, and sealed them there, hidden away beneath layers of rock and grief. Gaia groaned beneath their weight. The earth, once proud and nurturing, now suffered with every breath. It was in this pain that she began to scheme. But that is a story for another day. For now, remember this: in the oldest age, before law or justice, before sword or plow, the world was made not with hands, but with force and union and grief. Chaos birthed the first forms, but it was Gaia, the Great Mother, who gave them ground to stand upon. The union of Gaia and Uranus, earth and sky, was the first great marriage of the cosmos. It was not a marriage of altars or witnesses, but of necessity and nature. The sky stretched over the earth, holding her tightly, pressing her beneath his star-studded body night after night. From their joining came the Titans and other mighty offspring, but also a deep and growing sorrow. For Uranus, though proud and vast, was a jealous and fearful father. He saw in the monstrous children Gaia bore not strength, but a threat to his dominion. He looked upon the Cyclopes and the 100-handed giants with revulsion, not wonder, and with swift, cruel judgment he thrust them back into Gaia's womb, deep into the belly of the earth, where no light reached and no voice could echo. Gaia groaned beneath their weight. It was not only the agony of bearing them within her again, but the betrayal of her consort, of Sky, who should have cherished their children as she did. Night after night, Uranus descended upon her, pressing down the heavens to meet the earth, blind to her pain and deaf to her grief. She could endure no longer. And so, from her own flesh, she fashioned a weapon, not of bronze or iron, for such things had not yet been dreamed, but a great sickle of unyielding flint, jagged as truth and sharp as vengeance. Then she went to her Titan sons, the firstborn and mightiest among her children, and laid bare her suffering. "Your father has wronged me," she said. "He has caged your brothers. He has silenced the womb that bore you. Who among you will aid me?" One by one they turned away, fearful of their father's might. Only Cronus, the youngest, the shrewdest, the one with watchful eyes and a patient heart, stepped forward. "I will do it," he said. "Give me the blade." So Gaia set the trap. She waited for Uranus to descend, as he always did, laying himself across her in the dark. And from the shadows, Cronus sprang. With a steady hand and no hesitation, he brought the sickle down upon his father. The sky shook with Uranus's cry as the blade bit deep, severing the source of his power. Cronus cast the bloodied flesh into the sea, and from the crimson foam that rose upon the waves, something new was born. A figure of impossible beauty, terrible and irresistible in equal measure. From that white froth came Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, who would later cause kings to fall and empires to burn. She stepped ashore at Cyprus, radiant and serene, untouched by the violence of her origin. But Gaia's vengeance did not end with blood. From the droplets that fell upon the earth sprang other beings, the Furies, cloaked in shadow and vengeance, who would haunt oath-breakers and kinslayers until the end of days. The giants, who in time would rise up against the gods themselves, and the Meliae, nymphs of the ash trees, guardians of the wild and the old ways. Uranus, wounded and dethroned, vanished into the heavens, leaving the world to his children. Before he fled, it is said he spoke a final curse, one that would ring through time like a bell. "Just as I was overthrown by my son, so too shall he be overthrown by his own." It was not a prophecy he invented, but a truth Gaia had already whispered, and Cronus heard it well. He took the sky throne and wrapped himself in power, but from the moment he grasped it, he began to fear what his father had warned. Thus ended the reign of Uranus, the first king of the cosmos, and began the age of the Titans. Yet already in the womb of time, the next storm was stirring. With Uranus cast down and the sky no longer pressed so tightly upon the earth, the world breathed anew. The Titans, freed from their father's yoke, now stood tall beneath the heavens, and Cronus, the youngest and most cunning among them, claimed dominion over all. He was not a god of chaos or cruelty, as his father had been in the end, but he ruled with a cautious and suspicious heart. The sickle he had used to bring down Uranus remained hidden, buried in the earth or cast into the sea. Its blade remembered but unseen, like a secret sin. Cronus had delivered his mother from torment and his siblings from imprisonment. Yet from the very moment he sat the throne of the cosmos, his mind was troubled by the prophecy that had driven him to rebellion. The words of his dying father echoed through him like a second heartbeat, that he too would be cast down by his own child. So Cronus took a wife, as kings do. He chose Rhea, his sister, a Titaness of gentle strength and deep wisdom, though her name would one day be spoken in the same breath as pain. Together they ruled from Mount Othrys. They ruled through a time that later poets would remember as a golden age, a time when mortals, newly created, lived in peace, free from suffering, untouched by winter or war, and the fruits of the earth ripened without need for toil. It was an age before kings had armies, before men built walls or worshipped temples, when justice moved unseen among humankind, and no one locked their doors. But such peace, as the world has always known, does not last. In time, Rhea began to bear children, and as each was born, Cronus remembered his father's curse. He did not hesitate. The moment Rhea placed each newborn in his arms, first Hestia, then Demeter, then Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, he opened wide his jaws and swallowed them whole. Not a trace was left, not a cry, not a cradle, only the knowledge that they were gone, hidden within their father's belly like seeds in winter soil. He told Rhea it was necessary, that he would not suffer the same fate as Uranus, that the throne must be protected. Rhea, though proud and strong, was powerless against him. She wept, but her tears changed nothing. 5 times she gave birth, and 5 times she lost her children to the hunger of her husband's fear. But the 6th time she resolved to act. When she felt the child stir in her womb, she did not go to Cronus. She fled instead to the island of Crete, where the mountains met the sky and deep caves opened beneath the earth. There, hidden among shepherds and nymphs, she gave birth to her youngest son, Zeus, and from the moment of his birth, Rhea knew he was different. His cry shook the trees, his eyes opened before his first breath, and when he grasped her finger, he held it with the strength of fate itself. To deceive Cronus, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to him with trembling hands. He swallowed it greedily, thinking the danger had passed, but beneath Mount Ida, the infant Zeus was nursed in secret. He was guarded by the Curetes, warriors who danced and clashed their shields to drown out the sound of his cries, and fed by the goat Amalthea, whose milk gave him strength beyond measure. And as Zeus grew, so did the storm that would one day break the world. Yet for now, the age of Cronus held. The sky was high, the earth was green, and the Titans ruled from their thrones, oblivious to the gathering wind. But deep within Cronus, 5 children stirred in the dark, and far to the west, a child born in secrecy watched the stars and waited. In the hidden folds of Mount Ida, where the air was thin and the wind whispered ancient names through stone and pine, Zeus grew to manhood. Raised in secret, far from his father's gaze, he learned of the world, not through books or scrolls, but from the silence of the high peaks, the rustling of leaves, and the cautious stories murmured by his guardians in firelight. He drank the milk of the divine goat Amalthea, who had nourished him from birth and from her broken horn. Torn by accident or omen, was born the cornucopia symbol of endless bounty. When Amalthea died, Zeus hung her hide among the stars in her honor, and her memory became part of the sky he would one day command. But he was not born to stargazing or solitude. The blood in his veins was thick with prophecy, and his bones carried the weight of rebellion. As he came of age, Gaia herself began to stir. She remembered the betrayal of Cronus, the pain of her imprisoned sons, the 100-handed ones, and the Cyclopes buried deep in Tartarus. Her vengeance had not ended with Uranus, it had only been delayed. With words as old as stone, she whispered truth into Zeus's dreams, and in his waking hours she guided his steps. First, she led him to Metis, the goddess of wisdom, whose counsel was shrewd and whose loyalty leaned toward the future. With Metis's aid, Zeus fashioned a plan. To strike against Cronus, a king of Titans and time, would require more than strength. It would demand cunning. Zeus returned in disguise to the house of his father, and there, with Metis's craft, he offered Cronus a potion laced in wine, bittersweet and thick as honey. The drink stirred the old Titan's gut, and at last, with a shudder and a groan, Cronus vomited forth the children he had swallowed long ago. They came not as infants, but full-grown and gleaming, clad in the strength of gods, reborn into a world already poised for war. First Hestia, hearth and flame, then Demeter, goddess of the grain, then Hera, proud and sharp-eyed, then Hades, lord of the dead, and at last Poseidon, master of the deep. The 6 siblings stood together for the first time as one, and looked to the throne that had cast them into darkness. They would not forget. But Cronus was not without allies. The Titans rallied to him, his brothers and sisters gathering atop Mount Othrys, the old seat of power in the south. Oceanus remained apart, too old or too wise for blood feuds, but the others, Coeus, Creus, Hyperion, Iapetus, took up arms. So began the war the poets called Titanomachy, the clash of Titans and Olympians, a war that tore across the heavens and split the earth to its core. For 10 years the battle raged without end. The sky darkened with storm and smoke, thunder and fire echoed across the mountains, and the world below, still young and silent, watched in dread as its masters fought for the right to rule. The Titans held Mount Othrys, tall and time-worn, while Zeus and his kin made their stand upon Mount Olympus, a peak still unscarred by war. The battles were terrible and unrelenting. Lightning tore open the skies, and tidal waves swallowed islands whole. Volcanoes bled fire, and winds howled like wolves. At times the war seemed endless, neither side able to land the final blow. But Gaia, ever watchful, knew that the balance could not tip without what had been long buried. She counseled Zeus once more. If he were to win, he must descend into Tartarus and free his monstrous uncles, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, whom Cronus had kept locked in chains out of fear. With his siblings beside him, Zeus broke the gates of the underworld and released the imprisoned powers. The Cyclopes, grateful and eager, gifted Zeus his greatest weapons, the thunderbolt, the symbol of sky and storm. To Poseidon, they gave the trident with which he would command the seas, and to Hades, a helm of darkness that would make him unseen. The Hecatoncheires, giants with 100 hands, joined the fight at last, hurling mountains like stones and battering the Titans with the fury of ancient things unbound. With these allies, the tide turned. The Olympians pressed forward with a fury no Titan could match. Cronus, proud and unyielding, fought to the last, but the prophecy, as always, unfolded without mercy. The Titans fell. One by one they were driven down, cast from the high places of the earth. Zeus did not slay them. He imprisoned them as his father had done before. Deep into Tartarus they were hurled, bound in chains forged by the 100-handed ones behind bronze gates that would never rust or break. Only a few escaped that fate: Prometheus and Epimetheus, who had sided with the gods, and Themis, who foresaw the justice of their rule. So ended the reign of the Titans. The sky cleared, and the world, scarred by fire and war, began to heal. The throne passed to Zeus, not by birthright, but by might and wisdom, and fate fulfilled. Yet even as he claimed the heavens, the shadow of Cronus's curse lingered behind him like the echo of an old song. For power once seized must always be watched, and no ruler, god or mortal, sits secure forever. When the war was over and the world lay quiet beneath the sky once more, the victors stood amidst the rubble of creation. The Titans were chained in the depths of Tartarus, their groans swallowed by that black abyss from which no echo returned. The old order had been broken. But with the storm of war ended, the gods faced a new challenge, perhaps greater than any battle to rule. For conquest may be won with fire and fury, but rule demands judgment, patience, and division. The world was wide and wild, and filled with powers both known and yet unnamed. It could not be held by one alone. Zeus, eldest among the gods now born again, stood at the center of this new age. Though not the firstborn, He was first in might, first in cunning, and first to move when action was demanded. But the old laws carved not on stone, but into the bones of the cosmos itself, did not grant him sole dominion. He had two brothers, both tempered by war and made strong in their own right. Poseidon, who had driven the sea to foam in his wrath, and Hades, who had worn the helm of darkness and moved unseen through battlefield and cavern alike. They too had shed blood, taken risks, and suffered loss. The throne of the cosmos could not belong to Zeus alone, lest the seeds of war be sown anew, this time among brothers. And so the three gathered, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and cast lots to divide the realms of the world. Not through bickering or force, but by fate itself did the dice fall. This was no child's game. The casting of lots was sacred, guided by the same power that had spoken through Gaia's whispers and shaped the course of the Titanomachy. They threw the bones and waited. When they landed, the world was drawn into three great dominions. To Zeus fell the sky, the broad heavens, the air between stars and peaks. He became lord of thunder and rain, master of storm and cloud, and the undisputed king of Olympus. His voice would echo in thunderclaps, his fury would blaze in lightning, and the eagle became his herald, soaring high above all. To Poseidon fell the sea, deep and restless, full of mystery and monsters. He took the oceans, the rivers, and every spring that bubbled from the earth. With his trident, he could shatter cliffs and stir the tides to rage or calm. Beneath the waves, he built a palace of coral and gold, and there he ruled not only over fish and current, but over creatures older than time, sea serpents, leviathans, and things whose names had never been spoken aloud. To Hades fell the underworld, the land of the dead. It was not a prize most would have chosen, but Hades took it with quiet resolve. He ruled the shadowed realm with stern dignity, his kingdom hidden beneath the earth where the sun did not shine. There he became master of the shades, the judge of mortal souls, and guardian of wealth hidden in the deeps. Gems, metals, and secrets lost to time. Though men feared his name and whispered it only when necessary, Hades kept the balance between life and death. And it was said he never once broke the laws he was sworn to uphold. The earth itself, Gaia's own flesh, was left as a common realm shared by all. The mountains belonged to no one, the fields were roamed by mortals and spirits alike, and the forests grew wild under no single banner. It was a realm in between, where gods might walk and mortals might see them, but it was also where ambition brewed, and where fate would continue to work its quiet will. Thus the world was ordered, sky, sea, and underworld. The three brothers, now kings in their own realms, swore not to war among themselves, lest the world break anew. They built their thrones and gathered their followers. On Mount Olympus, high above the clouds, Zeus called the gods to council. There, beside him, stood his sisters, Hera, proud and sharp as winter ice, Demeter, whose steps awakened spring, and Hestia, ever burning at the hearth of every home. And others came, new and old, Athena, born from wisdom and war, Apollo, golden and far-seeing, Artemis, silent and swift, Ares, bloody-handed, Hermes, fleet of foot and mind, Hephaestus, limping but brilliant, and Aphrodite, whose smile could unravel kings. It was the beginning of a new age, the age of Olympus. But though the thrones had been set and the realms divided, the world would not stay still for long. The gods, for all their power, were not immune to pride, nor love, nor rage. And the mortals who now began to rise across the lands would bring their own stories, their own wars, and their own share of sorrow. The heavens had been won, but peace is never simple when gods sit the throne. When the smoke of war faded and the world was cast once more in sunlight, Mount Olympus became the seat of a new and glittering court. The Titans had ruled from Mount Othrys in the south, harsh, ancient, and wrapped in storm. But Olympus, in the north, stood higher still. its summit crowned in cloud and crowned in myth. The mountain was not merely a place, but a threshold, a place where sky met stone, where the mortal world ended and the divine began. It was here that Zeus, having claimed the heavens by fate and force, gathered the new pantheon of gods. The Olympian court did not mirror mortal kingdoms. There were no brick-paved roads leading to its gates, no heralds announcing guests, no armies stationed at its base. The gods needed no walls to guard them. The air itself served as their boundary, a veil too high for mortal breath. Olympus was said to have no storms, no snow, no decay. Its halls were of marble and cloud, its ceilings vaulted with starlight, and its corridors stretched wide enough for wind to wander freely. Here the gods walked not as shadows or omens, but in full form, radiant, terrible, and more alive than anything that walked the earth below. At the summit of Olympus stood Zeus, king of gods and men, seated upon a throne of thunder. He ruled not by brute strength alone, though his power was unmatched, but by the will of fate and the long memory of war. His voice carried like distant thunder, his eyes saw beyond clouds and time, and in his hand he carried the thunderbolt, the Cyclopes' gift, the symbol of judgment, swift and final. But even he did not rule alone. Around him stood the others, each a pillar in the new order of the world. Hera sat beside him, not merely as wife, but as queen, sovereign in her own right. She was the goddess of marriage, of queenship and childbirth, and the silent fury of a woman wronged. Proud and unyielding, Hera remembered every slight, and her jealousy would one day shape the fates of gods and mortals alike. Her crown was not one given but earned, forged in the fires of betrayal and bound by the sacred oaths of Olympus. Demeter came next, the goddess of grain and growth. Where her feet touched the earth, the soil softened and seeds stirred. Her presence brought harvest and plenty, and without her the fields grew barren. She did not sit high among the thunder and marble, but walked often in the world below, watching over the plowmen and mothers who whispered her name at dawn. She was older than most, quieter than many, but none doubted her power. Then there was Hestia, goddess of the hearth, the firstborn of Cronus and Rhea, and the last to be freed from her father's belly. She asked for no temple, no grand myths, no wars or lovers. She tended the eternal flame in the center of Olympus and watched over every home and hearth on earth. Her power was gentle, but ever present, for as long as fire burned in a household. Hestia lived there too. The younger gods came in time, some born in Olympus, others delivered by strange means. Athena was first among them, born not of womb, but of wisdom. When Zeus swallowed Metis, fearing her unborn child would surpass him, he thought the matter ended. But Metis did not die. She lived within him, whispering, scheming, crafting knowledge in the dark. One day Zeus groaned in agony, and with a blow to his skull, Athena sprang forth, fully grown, clad in bronze, spear in hand, her eyes clear and sharp as flint. She became goddess of wisdom, strategy, and just war, a virgin warrior with no patience for frivolity. Apollo and Artemis came next, twins born of Leto, a titaness who wandered long and weary to find a place to give birth. No land dared offer her sanctuary, for Hera's wrath was vast and vengeful. At last, the floating island of Delos accepted her, and there she bore her children. Apollo, golden-haired and bright, became the god of light, prophecy, music, and healing. His sister Artemis, swift and silver, was goddess of the hunt, of wild things and moonlight. Together, they marked a new generation of gods, restless, radiant, and intimately tied to the mortal world. Then came Ares, god of war and slaughter, son of Zeus and Hera, but beloved by neither. He was strength without discipline, rage without cause, and though his name was feared, he was not often honored. War followed him like a shadow, and he gloried in its chaos, but he was often bested by cunning and wisdom. His opposite was Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge, master of craft and flame. Born of Hera alone, or thrown from Olympus by Zeus, both tales are told. He found solace in metal, building wonders with hammer and fire. From his hands came armor, palaces, and automatons. Though limping and twisted, he was among the most indispensable of the gods. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire, arrived not by birth, but by foam, born of Uranus's severed flesh cast into the sea. She rose from the surf at Cyprus, as beautiful as she was dangerous. Love, lust, jealousy, and ruin followed her wherever she went. Even Zeus could not command her fully. She bound gods and mortals alike with a glance, and though she smiled often, it was never without consequence. Hermes, the trickster and herald, came last of this early court. Son of Zeus and the nymph Maia, he moved swiftly between worlds, winged sandals at his feet and a mischievous grin on his lips. He stole Apollo's cattle on the day of his birth, sang a song to cover the theft, and made himself indispensable before he could walk. He became the messenger of the gods, guide of souls, patron of thieves and travelers. Where Hermes went, borders dissolved. This was the Olympian court, a gathering not of saints, but of powers. Raw, flawed, radiant, and vast, they quarreled as siblings do, took sides in mortal affairs, fell in love, betrayed each other, waged petty rivalries, and enacted divine justice. But above all, they ruled from Olympus. They watched the world below and shaped it to their will. The age of Titans was gone, but in its place came an era of stories of gods who walked among men, of heroes born from their unions, and of a world forever changed by the hands of the divine. The world had its rulers now, but peace, as ever, was a fragile thing, and fate had not yet spoken its last word. Long before men raised cities of marble or carved their prayers into stone, there were no humans upon the earth. The gods ruled alone, their courts high upon Olympus, their domains vast and varied. The world beneath them was green and wild, teeming with beasts and silent mountains, but there were no hands to till the soil, no voices to sing to the stars, no fire to warm the night. It was Prometheus, a titan of the old blood, who first imagined the shape of man. He was no friend to Cronus, nor was he ever counted among those chained in Tartarus. During the War of the Titans, Prometheus had sided with Zeus, not out of love or loyalty, but out of foresight, for he bore the gift of prophecy, and he knew which way the storm would break. Prometheus's name meant forethought, and it suited him. He was brother to Epimetheus, whose name meant afterthought, and never was a pair of brothers more different. Where Epimetheus acted in haste and repented in leisure, Prometheus saw farther, thought longer, and questioned the justice of every decree, even those issued by the king of the gods himself. He walked the line between Titan and Olympian, old world and new, a creature of reason in a cosmos ruled by passion and power. It was he who first shaped mankind. Some say he sculpted them from clay beside the banks of a river, his fingers smoothing mud into limbs, his breath giving them life. Others claim he molded them in the image of the gods, upright and thoughtful, gifted with the spark of invention. But however it happened, the first men were made, and they were weak, soft of skin, slow of foot, clawless, fangless, and lacking in both fur and fire. They were naked beneath the sky, trembling in winter, defenseless against the beasts of the world. Prometheus looked upon them and pitied them. He went to Olympus and asked that man be given a gift, something to help them survive, something to raise them above the level of animals. But Zeus refused. He saw in mortals not promise, but peril. The god-king had only just seized his throne and was wary of new forces rising beneath him. "Let them live," he said, "but let them fear. Let them know their place beneath the gods." Fire, he declared, was the privilege of immortals, the hearth flame of Hestia, the thunderbolt of Zeus, the forge of Hephaestus. These were not for mortal hands. But Prometheus, stubborn and just, did not yield. In secret, he climbed to the heavens, stole a flame from the forge of Hephaestus, and hid it in a hollow fennel stalk. Carrying it down from Olympus, he gave it to man. For the first time, fire crackled beneath the stars. Smoke rose in spirals above the treetops. Light pushed back the darkness. With fire came warmth, safety, cooking, metal, language, craft. Humanity, once cold and voiceless, began to build. And with fire came defiance, too. Zeus was not long in discovering the theft. His fury was terrible. To punish mankind, he commissioned the gods to create a gift, though it was a curse in disguise. Hephaestus shaped her from clay, a woman of perfect beauty. Aphrodite gave her charm, Hermes gave her cunning, and Athena clothed her in silver raiment. Her name was Pandora, meaning all gifted, and she was given a sealed jar, mistranslated in later ages as a box containing the sorrows of the world, disease, toil, grief, madness, envy, and death itself. Epimetheus, ever the fool, took her into his home despite Prometheus's warnings, and when Pandora, driven by curiosity, the final gift of the gods, opened the jar, the evil spilled out into the world, like smoke from a fire too long confined. Mankind, who had known peace in their brief golden youth, now found themselves hunted by fate. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, war bled them dry, age stooped their backs. Only hope remained inside the jar, some say by accident, others say by design, a flickering light amid the gloom. But Prometheus's punishment had not yet come. For the crime of defying Olympus, Zeus ordered him chained to a mountain at the edge of the world. Some say the Caucasus, others say a place lost to myth. There he was bound in adamantine chains, unbreakable and eternal. Each day an eagle born of Typhon, or sent by Zeus, would descend and feast upon his liver. Each night it would grow back, and each morning the torment would begin again. He was immortal, and so the suffering could not kill him. He endured it for generations, long after kingdoms rose and fell, long after men forgot the gods who made them. And yet, even in chains, Prometheus did not repent. He knew a secret, a truth Zeus feared above all, that one day the king of the gods would fall, not by blade or rebellion, but by his own seed. It was this knowledge that protected Prometheus, for Zeus could not destroy him without first uncovering the name of the woman who would bear his doom. So the Titan waited, bound but unbowed, as men lit fires in the dark and told stories of the one who had dared to steal from the gods. The gods, for all their glory, were not alone in shaping the world. Beneath Olympus, on the soil that drank the rain and felt the sun's warmth, mankind struggled, rose, and fell again and again. Their lives, short and flickering beside the long memories of the immortals, still left a mark. And though Zeus ruled the skies and Poseidon stirred the seas, it was the deeds of mortals that filled the earth with both beauty and sorrow. The poets who lived after would look back on this long, winding journey and see not one mankind but many, each born into its own era marked by the blessings and punishments of the gods. It was Hesiod, the Boeotian farmer and poet, who first set these ages into words, dividing the long march of human existence into 5 distinct epochs: gold, silver, bronze, heroic, and iron. Each was less than the one before, save one. In the beginning there was the Golden Age, and it was unlike any time that followed. It came during the reign of Cronus, before the gods had learned to fear rebellion, and before the earth bore the weight of iron, or war. In those days, men lived like gods themselves, free from pain, untouched by age, and unburdened by toil. The earth gave forth her bounty without coaxing, offering harvests in every season. There was no need for laws or swords, no need for kings or coins. These early mortals knew no hunger, no sickness, no grief. When their time came, they did not wither or suffer, but died as if falling into sleep. their spirits becoming guardians, pure and watchful, wandering the world as kindly spirits, protectors of justice and peace. Theirs was a life of harmony, and theirs was the closest any mortal would ever come to Eden. But the Golden Age passed, as all golden things do. With the fall of Cronus and the rise of Zeus, the Silver Age dawned, a time of beauty dimmer and souls less noble. These mortals grew tall and strong, living long lives, but they lacked the wisdom and restraint of the golden race. They lingered in childhood for 100 years, ignorant and pampered, only to grow into violent, arrogant men who refused to honor the gods or heed their decrees. They built no temples, gave no offerings, and mocked the laws of Olympus. For this, Zeus struck them down. Their spirits did not become guardians or watchful spirits, but faded into the underworld, pale and forgotten. Theirs was a race lost to pride and disobedience, a mirror of divine fear come true. Then came the Bronze Age, born of ash trees, the same trees used for spears and shields. These were not gentle men. They were creatures of war, mighty and hard. Their very flesh said to be forged from bronze. Their homes were bronze, their tools were bronze, their hearts seemed cast from the same metal. They lived for battle and died by it, sowing the world with blood and ash. They were terrible to behold, but not evil, only driven by the rhythm of war drums and the clash of arms. They built no cities, wrote no poems, carved no statues. When they died, they left little behind but shattered swords and empty fields. Even the gods did not mourn their passing. They sank into Hades without echo or prayer. Yet not all decline is steady. From the blood and smoke of the Bronze Age rose a brief and brilliant light, the heroic age, a time unlike any other. It was not part of the descent, but an interlude of glory before the fall. These mortals were greater than those who came before or after. They were the demigods, the sons and daughters of gods and men. They built cities, sailed seas, and carved their names into the memory of the world. This was the age of Perseus and Heracles, of Theseus and Atalanta, of Jason and the Argonauts, of Hector and Achilles and Odysseus. They fought great wars against monsters, against foreign kings, and finally against each other at Troy. Many died young, and many more died forgotten. But their stories lingered, carried in song and stone, in epics and prayers. Some were granted a place in the Isles of the Blessed, far beyond the ocean's edge, where heroes dwell in peace and sunlight forever. The heroic age did not last, but while it burned, it lit the world. And then came the age that Hesiod called his own, the Iron Age, where we still dwell. This is a time of sorrow and toil, a world grown old and heavy. Men now labor from dawn to dusk, planting seeds in bitter soil, raising children amid war and famine, growing old with pain and fear. In the Iron Age, bonds break easily between friends, between kin, between guest and host. Justice, once tall and golden, now walks with her eyes averted. Lies are many, oaths are cheap, and the gods, if they still watch, do so with silence. In this age, mortals build towers, but forget their ancestors. They chase gold and power, and cut down the forests that fed them. It is an age of struggle, and it is said that one day even this will pass. One day the gods will turn their backs entirely. One day Zeus will cast down his thunderbolt, and humankind will vanish like smoke on the wind. Yet for all that the Iron Age endures, men still build, still hope, still tell stories of a time when mortals were golden and gods walked among them. And perhaps that hope, fragile though it is the one gift Zeus did not take back when Pandora opened the jar. In the waning light between the age of gods and the age of men, there came a generation of mortals unlike those before or after. Men born not from clay alone, but from divine blood and mortal wombs, shaped by both Olympus and earth. These were the heroes. Their lives were brief, their fates often cruel, but their names would echo through time like the rumble of a distant storm. Among the first and greatest of them was Perseus, slayer of monsters, founder of dynasties, and by blood and deed the forerunner of all who would wear a hero's crown. Perseus's tale begins not in battle, but in prophecy and fear. His mother Danae was a princess of Argos, daughter to King Acrisius. The king, like all kings of that age, feared what he could not control. An oracle warned him that his daughter would bear a son, destined to kill him. Such prophecies in myth, as in life, cannot be bribed or reasoned with. So, Acrisius did what kings so often do when faced with a truth they fear. He sought to destroy the cause. He locked Danae in a tower of bronze beneath the earth, a room sealed against time and men alike. But the gods, as they often did, laughed at mortal precautions. Zeus, in the form of golden rain, slipped through cracks no wall could keep and fell upon Danae in her solitude. From that union, Perseus was conceived. When Acrisius discovered the child, he dared not spill royal blood directly, for even tyrants fear the wrath of the gods. Instead, he placed Danae and her infant son into a wooden chest and cast them into the sea, trusting Poseidon or chance to drown them. But the sea is as fickle as fate. The chest did not sink, but drifted across the wine-dark waves to the island of Seriphus, where a humble fisherman named Dictys drew it ashore. He took them in, raised Perseus as his own, and in time the boy grew tall and strong, with the bearing of kings and the eyes of storms. But peace is never a long companion to those who carry destiny. The ruler of Seriphos, King Polydectes, took notice of Danae's beauty and desired her. Perseus, grown into manhood, stood between his mother and the king, a wall of defiance. Polydectes, unable to strike the son without dishonoring himself, chose cunning over strength. He announced a false marriage, some say to Hippodamia, and demanded that all men of the island offer him a gift. Perseus, without gold or horses, boasted that he would instead bring the king a greater prize: the head of Medusa, the mortal Gorgon, whose gaze could turn flesh to stone. The task was cruel, and Polydectes knew it. No man who had sought Medusa had ever returned. She was one of 3 Gorgon sisters, born of ancient sea deities, hideous and winged, their heads wreathed in snakes, their eyes cursed. Only Medusa was mortal. Her sisters were immortal, and none could be approached without peril. But the gods, who watched the world with curious eyes, favored Perseus. Athena, born from her father's head and never one to forget a slight, lent the young hero her polished shield. In its mirror-bright surface, he could see a Gorgon without meeting her gaze directly. Hermes, swift and shrewd, gave him a curved sword and winged sandals to fly, and directed him to the Graeae, the Grey sisters who shared a single eye between them and knew the secret path to the Gorgon's lair. Through wit and will, Perseus stole their eye and bargained for the truth. They told him where to find the nymphs who guarded the sacred objects he would need. From them he received the helm of Hades, which made its wearer invisible, and the cabesus, a magical sack that could safely contain the Gorgon's head. The sisters also revealed the path beyond ocean's edge, to the place where night never lifted and the Gorgons slept among ancient stones. Armed with these divine gifts, Perseus flew over sea and desert until he reached the ends of the earth. He found them sleeping, Medusa and her sisters, curled in a shadowed grove, ringed by the statues of those who had come before. Perseus dared not look directly, and so with Athena's shield held before him, he moved forward, step by cautious step, watching only the reflection, until he stood over the sleeping Gorgon. With one swift stroke he severed her head, and from her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the warrior with a golden blade, children of Poseidon, born in death. As Medusa's sisters screamed and clawed the air, Perseus vanished into mist, hidden by the helm of darkness. The deed was done. He returned by the long road, his prize heavy in the sack, its power undiminished. On the way, he passed the shores of Ethiopia, where the sea god had sent a monster to punish King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia for their vanity. Their daughter, Andromeda, had been chained to a rock as sacrifice. Perseus, beholding her beauty and innocence, slew the beast, turned it to stone with the Gorgon's head, and claimed her as his bride. She would follow him westward, becoming the mother of his line. When at last he returned to Seriphus, Polydectes scoffed at his tale. So Perseus reached into the sack and withdrew the severed head. The king and his court were turned to stone where they stood. Dictys, the fisherman who had shown kindness to a mother and her child, became king in his stead. The cycle of cruelty was broken, if only for a time. But prophecy once spoken is not so easily undone. Perseus journeyed to Argos, where King Acrisius, still haunted by the words of the oracle, fled rather than face the boy he had once condemned to death. Yet fate does not forget. At the funeral games of a neighboring king, a discus thrown by Perseus struck an old man in the crowd. The victim was Acrisius, his grandfather. His death was not murder, but an accident long foretold. And so the circle closed, as it so often does in myth. Perseus had fulfilled the prophecy, though not by malice. He had slain a monster, saved a maiden, founded a line of kings, and carried the weight of fate with dignity. He would not live forever, but his name would. For from his blood would come Heracles. And from Heracles, the next chapter in the story of the gods and men. If Perseus was the first great hero, Heracles was the mightiest. His name, like thunder over distant mountains, carried weight across every land touched by Hellenic breath. He was not merely strong, but larger than life itself, straddling the border between man and God, joy and grief, triumph and tragedy. He was the great-grandson of Perseus, a scion of Argos, and a son of Zeus. And though the gods would bless him with strength, they would curse him with suffering. His birth was itself a trick of time. Zeus, ever lustful, desired Alcmene, wife of the Theban general Amphitryon. Disguised as her husband, the king of the gods lay with her, extending a single night into threefold length. From that union came Heracles, and from Amphitryon a twin, Iphicles, mortal and ordinary. Hera, as always, watched from her throne with a cold and bitter eye. She knew her husband's ways, and she knew too well the threat that this child, half-god though he was, might one day pose to her own dominion. Even in the cradle, Heracles bore the mark of the divine. Hera, seeking to destroy him early, sent 2 serpents into the nursery to strangle the infant. But the child reached out with plump hands and throttled them both, one in each fist, before any nurse could scream. From that moment, his fame began to grow. As a youth, he trained in all the arts befitting a nobleman: music, archery, wrestling, and chariot driving. Yet there was something wild in him, a restlessness of soul that no lyre or tutor could tame. Manhood brought him both love and ruin. He married Megara, daughter of the Theban king Creon, and for a time lived in peace, fathering sons and defending his city. But Hera had not forgotten. In a fit of divine wrath, she clouded Heracles' mind with madness. Raging through his own halls, he slew his wife and children with the same hands that had once cradled them. When the madness passed and his vision cleared, he beheld the blood and ruin of his own house. His cries reached Olympus, but no god answered. To atone, he sought out the oracle of Delphi. The Pythia, speaking in riddles, told him he must submit to the will of Eurystheus, king of Tiryns, his cousin, lesser in strength but greater in fate. Only through servitude, through suffering, could Heracles earn redemption. Thus began the 12 labors, deeds so great and terrible that even the gods took notice. The first labor was to slay the Nemean lion, a beast whose golden hide could not be pierced by mortal weapons. Heracles cornered it in its cave and strangled it with his bare hands. He flayed the beast using its own claw and wore the skin as armor thereafter, a second hide to shield him from the world. The second was the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with 9 heads, 2 of which would grow back for every one severed. Heracles battled it in the swamps, aided by his nephew Aeolus, who cauterized the stumps as they were cut. From the last head, immortal and venomous, Heracles harvested its ichor and dipped his arrows in it, making them deadly even to gods. The third labor was the capture of the Cyrenian hind, a golden-horned deer sacred to Artemis. Heracles chased it for a year across hills and rivers before gently capturing it alive, earning the goddess's reluctant approval. The fourth labor led him to the Erymanthian boar, a monstrous beast of the wild. He wrestled it in the snow-covered heights of Arcadia and dragged it back to Tiryns bound in chains, laughing as Eurystheus hid in terror inside a bronze jar. The fifth task was less glorious, to clean the Augean stables, home to thousands of cattle untouched by broom or shovel for decades. Heracles, ever the problem solver, rerouted 2 rivers to wash away the filth in a single day. The sixth was to drive away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with bronze beaks and razor-feathered wings. With the aid of Athena's rattle, he startled them into flight and shot them down from the sky. The seventh labor took him far west to capture the Cretan bull, a beast of divine origin that had fathered the Minotaur. Heracles wrestled it and brought it back alive while the bull's gaze burned with madness and sea-salt fury. The eighth labor sent him north to Thrace, where he tamed the mares of Diomedes, flesh-eating horses that gnashed their teeth for human meat. He fed Diomedes their master to them, and the beasts grew docile. The ninth labor required diplomacy and blood. Heracles was sent to retrieve the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Though the queen agreed to gift it peacefully, Hera spread rumors among the warrior women and battle broke out. Heracles slew Hippolyta and escaped with the belt. The 10th led him to the edge of the known world, to Erythia, where he stole the cattle of Geryon, a 3-bodied giant. He built the Pillars of Heracles at the Strait of Gibraltar and fought the giant, his herdsman, and his hound all at once before driving the red cattle back across continents. But Eurystheus, seeking to discredit him, declared 2 labors invalid, claiming Iolaus had helped with the Hydra and the rivers with the stables. 2 more were required. The 11th was to steal the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by nymphs and a dragon coiled around the tree's base. Heracles tricked Atlas, the sky-bearer, into retrieving the apples while he held the heavens. When Atlas tried to leave him the burden, Heracles asked for a moment to adjust his cloak and took back the sky while fleeing with the fruit. The 12th and final labor was the most harrowing, to descend into Hades itself and bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed hound. Armed with nothing but his strength, Heracles journeyed to the underworld, presented himself before Hades, and with the gods' grim permission, wrestled Cerberus into submission, and led the beast, snarling and frothing, into the land of the living. With that final labor, his redemption was won. Yet Heracles' life was not yet at peace. He fought more battles, took new wives, and fathered many children. But Hera's hatred endured. In the end, it was not blade or monster that killed him, but the poisoned blood of the centaur Nessus smeared upon a tunic gifted by his wife, Deianira, who believed it a love charm. As the poison burned through his flesh, Heracles ordered a funeral pyre built on Mount Oeta. No mortal dared light it until Philoctetes, a simple shepherd, stepped forward. In return, he was given the hero's bow. Heracles was consumed by flame, but in death he was reborn. Zeus lifted him to Olympus, where he was granted immortality and married to Hebe, goddess of youth. He became not just a hero, but a god. His labors, born of grief and guilt, became the very measure of heroism. Where others were remembered in story, Heracles was remembered in shrines, in games, and in the hearts of men who, though mortal, dared to dream of greatness. However, and that is where the story of Heracles comes to an end, but Greek mythology itself is far from over. There are still the voyages of Odysseus, the Trojan War, the Golden Fleece, the adventures of Theseus, and the sorrowful story of Orpheus and Eurydice. People were telling these tales beside the fire more than 2,500 years ago, and somehow we are still telling them now. Perhaps that is because the myths are not really only about gods and monsters, they are about people, about fear and hope, about mistakes, pride, love, grief, and the stubborn courage to keep going. Why does good so often come face to face with evil? Why do even the strongest people break, lose control, or choose badly? Why does fate sometimes seem stronger than will? And why, even then, does a human being rise and continue down the road? That may be why Greek mythology never disappeared. It is not only about the gods, it is about us, the way we are afraid, the way we hope, and the way we try to become a little better than we were yesterday. And perhaps, as long as these stories are still being told, Olympus has not vanished at all. It simply lives on in memory. Thank you for taking this long journey through the world of Greek myth. Now you can close your eyes. Let the sound of the ancient sea slowly fade. Let the final stars above Olympus grow dim. And let these old stories remain beside you for a little while longer, as the night grows deeper and sleep becomes calmer. Good night.